Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judy, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the Full10Yard NFL podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Full10Yards NFL podcast. I'm your host Sam Moores, and we're just over 2 weeks away from the NFL draft, so I'm back to recap the off-season and look forward to the draft. Over the next few weeks, we're putting the magnifying glass over each team and predicting where the top prospects in the draft may land. And joining me today to look at what each AFC team needs to address in the draft in Detroit at the end of the month and discuss the biggest off-season moves is our NFL draft expert, obviously co-host of the Go For Two podcast as well, Mr. Liam Horsley. It was a fun free agency, Liam, especially in the AFC, but now the attention turns to the draft, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, most of the big moves are kind of done now. You won't see May signings before the draft. Teams will probably wait till the draft, see what they don't fill need-wise, and then add some veterans after that. So, yeah, we're kind of firmly in draft mode now. Every fan of a bad team is doing loads of mock drafts. Every fan of a good team is working out, okay, where are we going to fill these last holes we need? So, yeah, exciting time. I personally love the draft. Like you said, I love college football. Always involved in kind of doing some draft guides and analysis for whether it's Full10Yards or other companies. So, yeah, I'm excited to chat all things draft and a kind of off-season with you.
And while the top of the draft is very NFC heavy, there are some teams in the AFC in the top 10 you could say that we really wonder what they're going to do. Their picks, like the Patriots, the Chargers, for example, as well as teams in the AFC like the Broncos and the Raiders that may be looking to trade up for a quarterback as well. So there's plenty to talk about in the AFC, and we'll start in the AFC North. We'll start with the Cincinnati Bengals. They went 9-8 in the regular season, missed the playoffs, but obviously that's because Joe Burrow was out for most of the year. The biggest loss you could probably say was Chidobe Awuzie to the Titans. They lost DJ Reader as well to the Lions, but they replaced him with Sheldon Rankins. Geno Stone came over from the Ravens, and Von Bell came back from the Panthers as well. Trent Brown came on as a tackle for the offensive line, but I think the Bengals, unless someone like Brock Bowers falls, they should. I'm thinking they should go for that. Try to address the offensive line again, because there are still sort of questions over it. How do you feel?
Yeah, so in general, for people listening who don't follow the draft, offensive line this year is very strong. Wide receivers also very strong. They're probably two of the four strongest positions in this draft class. I'd say they're two areas the Bengals should probably target. Doesn't look like they're going to pay T. Higgins. In terms of the draft, I actually think we probably could still see him traded by night 2 of the draft, probably, or potentially. So if they know they're trading T, I would probably go wide receiver in this spot. But if they're planning on keeping T, playing him on the tag for one more year, then yeah, you're right. Offensive line is definitely the spot. Whether it's tackle or guard, there's multiple things they can do. Obviously, both tackles they've got now are the bigger, most huge tackles you can get in the NFL in the two Brown brothers. But yeah, one's on a 1-year deal. One's got, I think, 2 or 3 years left. But they can cut him after next year. So they're not really set at tackle long-term either way. And then in terms of guard, they can definitely improve both guard, if not also center positions. So yeah, you're right. For me, if T stays, then you go offensive line for sure in the first round, whether that's J.C. Latham, player they've been linked to from Alabama, Tyler Guyton, who's a good prospect, or Marius Mims, who's the ideal for the Bengals because he probably can't play in year 1. You need to play him in year 2. So yeah, there's plenty of names, but it just depends what they're doing with T, if they're going to keep him or trade him.
Exactly. He had the franchise tag put on him at the start of free agency. Obviously, he'll be a free agent at the end of the season, and because they've got Jamar Chase playing, so they've got to pick up his 5th-year option, but they're going to pay Jamar Chase, and they can't afford to pay both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So one of them will probably make way in. The expectation is that it will be T. Higgins. Right, the next team in the AFC North are the Cleveland Browns. Now, they don't have a first round pick because they traded it to the Texans for the Deshaun Watson trade, but they do have 2 top 100 picks. They pick it sort of midway through the second round, and their biggest move was Jerry Jeudy, bringing in Jerry Jeudy from the Broncos, adding him to Amari Cooper as well. But they lost some players on defense. Where do you think the Browns should target in the second and third round. They've got a pick in each round.
Yeah, it's difficult. The roster's pretty stacked, to be fair. On my biggest need sheet, I still wrote quarterback. That's from some bias that everyone's probably heard throughout the whole season from me on the pod. But yeah, in terms of positions of need, in those sort of areas of the round, you're looking at defensive tackle, linebacker, the defense. Obviously, the defense was really good last year. You can't normally count on defenses to be that great 2 years in a row. You still need to freshen it up, and I think they're probably the positions you could, especially the defensive tackle group looks good on paper, but they're older, so you want some kind of long-term options, whether that's like a Devondre Sweat, who would fit the Browns' off-field concerns after just getting arrested last week. But he fits that team perfectly. And the linebacker group this year is pretty bad. But there's a couple of names like Peyton Wilson, Junior Colson, that will probably be ready in rounds 2 or 3. Like ideally, you go round 3. I think it's like pick 85. But if you have to go pick 54 because linebackers start moving, you've got the option there. So yeah, they're in a good position that the positions they need are probably going to not go off much until round 2 and 3. And the rest of their kind of main positions are stacked. But it would not surprise me if they maybe add a wide receiver at some point, just with that Amari Cooper kind of big cap hit looming, and maybe they move on next year.
I was going to say as well, you've got some big free agents. I've got Greg Newsome as well. He's going to be a free agent. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is going to be a free agent next year as well. So you've got some. They're in a position where they can draft ahead of need, so they can draft for the future as well because they've got such a good roster. So if they do go corner or linebacker, you don't be surprised by that. Okay, we've got the Ravens now, and looking at their free agent sort of departures list, it's huge. They've lost so many starters, and they didn't really bring anyone in. Obviously, the big move was obviously. Bringing Derrick Henry to that backfield, which is Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in standing behind center is just incredible to think of. They got Josh Jones, a tackle from Houston as well. It's another move for them. But yeah, so the Ravens are for me. They've lost a couple of weapons and they've lost a couple of starters on the offensive line. So for them, they got 3 top 100 picks, but I'm really interested to see what they do because they've lost a lot of starters, haven't they, Liam?
Yeah, they have. They do this kind of every year, though, in terms of the free agent pool. They'll wait till after the draft, play a complete game, get some old veterans in. So this is very kind of Baltimore. I'd say the difference this year is they've lost more draft picks than they'd like in 1 year just because they had a really good draft a few years ago. That draft, obviously, with Patrick Queen and Geno Stone in, was probably better than people thought. So I think this year it's a bit more highlighted, but they do this every year. I would say edge rusher is an area they could definitely look to improve on, but they are the team that sign edge rushers in June every year and they get 10 sacks. So we'll see if they've
already signed Carl Van Noy back this week as one of them. They just add loads. So
they do. They just take a flyer, add 3 older guys, hope one of them hits, which they normally do. But apart from the edge rusher position, which they might not do, the offensive line is definitely a big concern. They traded Moses to the Jets, which I thought they shouldn't have done. They let John Simpson walk, which I thought was probably the right decision to make. And
also to the Jets as well.
Yeah, also to the Jets. And then they've got Ronnie Stanley there, who's always injured, but is still a good player when he actually plays.
He's a free agent as well at the end of the year. Ronnie Stanley is as well. Yeah. So
yeah, and they lost Kevin Zeitler as well to Detroit. So they've lost 4 of they've lost 3 of their starting offensive linemen. The fourth could go next year. So apart from center, they can probably improve on all 4 spots. And like I said earlier, this year is the draft to go and improve at offensive. Guard or tackle. But another name I wanted to mention for them that would just fit them perfectly is Darius Robinson, edge rusher from Missouri, who played defensive tackle and edge rusher. Nasty player, very good in the run game, very good at rushing the passer, kind of Baltimore attitude. So I thought he would fit really well. There's loads of offensive linemen that we'll talk about for many teams later on that also fit Baltimore because there's going to be at least 8 offensive linemen that go in the first round, and all the names we talk about today, Baltimore will probably be keen to add because they're all very good players.
Yeah, so from offensive line, defensive line, and they've got a decision to come with Marlon Humphrey as well. So they maybe corner later, and they've got quite a few in the second round as well. For them, maybe just look for corner, but they've got being at 30, they've got plenty of choice really, because you can trade back into the second round if you feel like there's not a guy there, and maybe get another sort of day 2 pick, late day 2 pick as well. So the Ravens got plenty of choice, but yeah, there's some holes to be filled. There you go. Some holes to be filled for the Ravens, certainly. Finally, finishing off the AFC North with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were the third team to make the playoffs last year. Obviously, lost in the wildcard round to the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Steelers have 4 top 100 picks. Their biggest move was getting a Patrick Queen from the Ravens, as well as obviously bringing in both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields at quarterback. So they're not going to be a competition apparently. So it sounds like Russell Wilson's going to start, but they've got Justin Fields and they gave both of them 1-year deals. So we'll see what happens there. But the Steelers, their biggest loss was Deontay Johnson to the Panthers. So at 20, they're going to get someone like a Brian Thomas there as a guy might be out there on the board at 20. The offensive line's a big need as well. They lost Okorafor to New England. So yeah, the Steelers' offensive line's not been great for a while, but they also have a sort of need at receiver now. So where do you think they could go with the 20th pick?
Yeah, it's tough. Pick 20. It just depends what Brian Thomas Jr., like you mentioned, is he off the board? Is he not? There's other players as well, to be fair. There's players that you'll see, whether it's Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, they'll all get mocked
Mitchell
somewhere.
As well.
AD Mitchell's a really good one. Now, AD Mitchell's a bit too similar to me for George Pickens, so I would probably stay away, but they might be inclined to do that. But yeah, knowing the Steelers and the fact they're very good at drafting wide receivers in later rounds, would not surprise me, like we just said with the Ravens, if they go offensive line in round 1. Amarius Mims, bit of a project. Tyler Guyton would really fit the Steelers offense well. They need a center. So you've got kind of Powers Johnson or Zach Frazier, 2 centers that will probably both go in the top 32, if not 36 picks. So I think they probably go offensive line, and then I would say they would address that wide receiver position at pick 51 or 84 in the second and third round. With the caveat being, I think if Brian Thomas Jr. falls, Steelers will probably pick him. But we'll see if he's there or not. But yeah, I expect offensive lineman, wide receiver in some order in round 1 and 2.
Awesome. Right. We'll just before going to the AFC East, I want to elaborate on a big move in the AFC North that we didn't really talk about. We sort of just glossed over it. Obviously, Derrick Henry coming over from the Titans to the Ravens. Now the Ravens, they got to the AFC Championship game last year. Obviously, lost to the Chiefs. They were the number 1 seed. What when you first heard this move, what was your initial thought? That obviously, because there was room for a while. Obviously, Henry he's getting older now. He's basically looking for a ring. It's a good fit. Obviously, the way the Ravens have run the ball previously, last year less so, less much. But with Derrick Henry, I'm fascinated to see this offense. I don't know about you.
Yeah, so first reaction was obviously because it was probably one of the ones, when you're probably about 2 weeks for free agency, I think everything kicks off and everyone starts making predictions and you listen to your pods about who could go where. And I think, Henry to the Ravens was basically the common rumor. So my first reaction was like, finally, it kind of obviously happened. This seemed to be the only place really that was going to pay him any sort of good money. In terms of AFC perspective, it didn't really faze me. Someone who likes the numbers, I'm not really in the camp that running backs matter too much. My team wins it with 7-round running backs as from the draft, and I think that's probably the way that the team should go. So didn't really faze me. I think it's going to look pretty cool. I think early in the season it could be quite dangerous, and we'll just have to see if he stays healthy. But I think one of the key things to me is what you mentioned, that last year they didn't run an offense that would suit Derrick Henry. 2 years ago, they really did. So will they kind of try and combine a little bit of those concepts? Now they've lost Odell Beckham. Rashad Bateman doesn't look like he's going to be as good as everyone had hoped. And they're probably down on weapons again this year, arguably, from a receiver perspective. So, if they run it a bit more than they did last year, I think he's a pretty good fit. He can still do that. One thing I will say, I don't want to be too negative on the move. So in the red zone, they're going to score loads of touchdowns. Yeah. If you're a defense, the idea is don't let them get to the red zone. I think they could actually struggle. If you look at the offensive line and the lack of wide receiver too, I think they could struggle in between the 20s. But if they get in the 20 with Jackson and Henry, they're going to score so many rushing touchdowns. And then again, that'll only open the door for Likely and Andrews to score. So I think they'll be deadly in the red zone. But I think their offense will probably be worse than it was last year, unless they go and add a top wide receiver in the draft, and then they could be elite. So at the moment, I think Ravens a little bit TBC because they need to fix offensive line. You can't run the ball with a bad offensive line, regardless of who your running back is. So We'll see. But yeah, it was a typical move, and I think he's going to look good. And there'll be a lot of jerseys when we go to that NFL London. There'll be a lot of Derrick Henry Ravens jerseys, which will look quite cool.
And from everything I'm reading as well, this is the draft to address your offensive line. There's 10 or so could go in the first round, and there's some depth in day 2 as well. So there's certainly plenty of guys for the Ravens to target. Right. We'll move over to the AFC East, and we'll start with the AFC champions from a year ago, coming from 3-4 games back to win the division. The Buffalo Bills at 11-6. They have the 28th pick. They also have the 60th pick in the second round as well. They're only 2 top 100 picks. And the big sort of change of the Bills in the offseason is that they've now got a completely new, weaker receiving core after losing after trading Stephon Diggs to the Texans and losing Gabe Davis to the Jags in free agency. They've also lost quite a few defensive backs as well. So it's be interesting to see where they go at 28. I mean, I would say they've got the ammunition to trade up for a receiver at 28, but they haven't really got that many picks either. This feels like a bit of a rebuild from the Bills, obviously replacing, bringing in Curtis Samuel and Matt Collins as your 2 receivers. I don't think Curtis Samuel is a receiver 1, so that's their sort of glaring need. But how do you see, what do you think they'll do? Because at 28, they've got with not many picks, they've got an interesting scenario coming up.
Yeah, I think you'll see loads of pods talk about this big trade up. I think I watched one yesterday, Roma Dunze, trade up for him at 10. Or 9, maybe, sorry. But I don't think that's the way they go. They're quite a smart team. Like, they've gone all in, obviously, and then now they've made the decision to pull the plug this year. And obviously, I'm a Chiefs fan, so I've got a lot of Chiefs fans friends, and they always laugh at the Bills, whereas I'm kind of not in that wavelength. I think they've done really well, and they're always the team that challenges the Chiefs better than anyone else. So I think it's a good time to probably pull the plug. I might have pulled the plug on the coach as well, but in terms of pick 28, I just wouldn't. If there's a small trade up, if Brian Thompson gets to 21, 22, and you're like, oh, let's make a little trade up, I think that makes a lot of sense now they've got extra picks next year. But I wouldn't trade up kind of a million miles and lose a second and a third or a first and a fifth, because I just think they have a lot of holes in the roster. Like you said, defensive back is a big hole, safety and corner. Wide receiver, they probably need 2, not just 1. Offensive line, they probably need 2. They got rid of Mitch Morse, their center, so they need to replace him. So for me, I think everyone's going to mock them receiver round 1. Me too, as well. But I don't think I'll be doing it with a trade up. I think I'll just be like A.D. Mitchell maybe at 28. Perfect fit for them, bit of a speedster. Tall guy, very Diggs-esque, actually. Not as good route runner, but is good on deep throws. So, yeah, whether it's Brian Thomas or A.D. Mitchell, that makes a lot of sense to me. But, yeah, I wouldn't go with this massive trade up. When you got Josh Allen, I'm not going to say they're going to win the Super Bowl, but teams have traded good wide receivers before and had a good season. So I think they can maybe take a step back on offense, but take a step forward on defense with last year. But yeah, they need a really, really good draft. It'll be one of the most important drafts in GM's history there, because if he has another bad one, then yeah, he could be out of a job soon, because this is a big year.
Well, to what needing defensive back, they've sort of missed. Well, it seems that they've missed a few players at defensive back as well. High in the draft recently is 2. So a lot is on the line for Brandon Beane. A lot is on the line for Chris Greer as well, the Miami Dolphins general manager, because this is their last year of their sort of Super Bowl window as well. The Bills, Dolphins, and Jets have all gone gung-ho the last couple of years in the AFC East. And the Dolphins, this free agency, it really showed that all those picks, they've now reached free agency, and they lost 2019 first-round pick Christian Wilkins, and they lost one of their first picks in the 2020 draft in the second round, Robert Hunt, to the Panthers as well in free agency. He was one of their best offensive linemen, so that's a big need to fill. But the offensive and defensive line is weaker for the Dolphins this year. They made some good moves. They've upgraded at tight end, linebacker. But yeah, the Dolphins, very much it's the trenches that it should be targeting at to pick 21, really, isn't it? Whether it's defensive lineman or an interior offensive lineman to replace Robert Hunt.
Yeah, they probably should target trenches at both picks in their first and second round, to be honest. In terms of, defense first, replacing Wilkins, Byron Murphy from Texas would be a very, very good fit. He's probably better than he is better than Christian Wilkins was coming out, for my money. I think he's a very good player, fits their defense well. Obviously, the edge rushers are very good. I know Van Ginkel's are gone, but you've still got Jalen Phillips there, so we'll see how he comes back from his injury. But I would be wanting to pair them with a good defensive tackle, which is Byron Murphy. Now, in round 2, you've got like Ruka, which is a great name, from Clemson, which I think makes sense, and Chris Jenkins from Michigan if you do round 2. But yeah, offensive line, we'll speak about it for every team, but there's loads of options. I would still go tackle if I was them, but you've got a player like
Teron Armstead's a free agent at the end of the year as well, so, and he could retire at any point as well.
He's always injured.
He's always injured. He's not expected to. So he's not expected to be in Miami long term. This is probably his last year in Miami as well. So you could probably play a guy at guard and then move him to tackle in year 2.
Yeah, and that's why Graham Barton for me from Duke is a great option. I think you're probably a Pro Bowl guard if he plays guard. Maybe if you move him to tackle, he might not be as good. He hasn't got as long arms. That's why, for anyone listening, you'll see Barton mentioned as a guard or a tackle, depending on who you listen to. It's just because his arms are a little bit shorter. But yeah, for me, there's probably better players you might be able to take at 21 if they fall, but not at that position. I think Barton would be a great pick. Mims would be a great pick too, but you'd have to decide with Mims. He's not going to play at all in year 1. He'll just sit behind Armstead and learn, which I think is not a bad tactic. But yeah, if they ended up with Barton or Byron Murphy, it'll be a really good draft for the Dolphins. But they do need to hit in round 2 or 3 on another guard from somewhere, just because don't want to turn it into a Tua slander pod, but he's definitely not the one you want behind a bad offensive line. So if I was them, 2 of my first 4 picks are on tackle guard in whichever way that they end up falling. I just don't think you want to go into next season with a bad offensive line.
Well, you can see the difference with Tua the last 2 years compared to his 2 years previous, where the Dolphins had a horrific offensive line. Since bringing in Armstead and the likes of Austin Jackson and Robert Hunt improved in their sort of second, third, fourth years in the NFL, then you saw the offensive unit a lot better and Tua a lot better under pressure as well. With the Dolphins as well, it's interesting because they've got quite a few. They got the questions surrounding Tua because he is expected to get a multi-year contract this year, but they've not committed to him yet. They've not done that contract yet. It's widely expected that they will pay him, but there are some people who are mocking quarterbacks late in the mock drafts to the Dolphins, whether it's like Michael Penix or Bo Nix. Well, I think that's unlikely because 1, the Dolphins are really scared of quarterback competition. That's always been the case with them. And 2, I think this regime are pretty much tied down to Tua, because if the Dolphins don't win a playoff game this year, Chris Greer's gone as general manager, and they're probably going to blow it all up. So it's interesting. I can't see Chris Greer, picking another quarterback. I don't know how you feel about that, but they still haven't paid Tua yet.
I would pick another quarterback. I wouldn't pick one at 21, but
No.
Later maybe. I'm a big fan of Spencer Rattler, so Spencer Rattler in the 3rd would be a good move. Maybe not the best for a locker room competition because he's a very confident boy. But yeah, it just sounds like from everything I read, obviously you're much closer to me, that they are going to pay Tua. I know it hasn't happened yet, but that's more of a timing thing from what I'm hearing. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I keep hearing. Now I wouldn't, but that seems to be the way that they're going. It's always a bit of cat and mouse, isn't it? You've got the Jordan Love deal, like when's that fully going to get sorted? You've got obviously the Tua deal. Trevor Lawrence could get paid now if they choose to. So it's always a bit of cat and mouse. Like the agents want to wait, the teams want to go now. So it could just be a timing thing for Tua. As a Dolphins fan, are you comfortable paying Tua $50 million a year?
I think if you pay him now, give him. I don't think it'll be a 5-6 year. I think it'll be 3-year contract.
Shorter deal,
I think it'll be a shorter deal. Not too dissimilar to what the Giants did with Daniel Jones. Obviously, a little bit more sort of in like Kirk Cousins range money, I'd say. But from the way he's played the last 2 years, that's been earned. It's just the way they've crumbled late in the year. That's the only caveat. That's what I'm saying. If Dolphins don't win a playoff game this year, I think they're going to blow everything up. I think McDaniel could stay, but certainly Chris Greer's going. That's why this draft's really important for him. And they've not had sort of day 2 picks. Well, they've not had a first round pick the last 2 years. This roster's quite a top heavy old roster. So, but they got picks this year. They need to smash this off with younger players, because otherwise this roster is going to have to get absolutely torn apart within the next sort of 18 months or so. the same could probably be said for the New York Jets, obviously, because this is this is sort of boom or bust for them as well. Obviously, paying Aaron Rodgers all that money a year ago. Now he didn't play, of course, but they did win 7 games without Aaron Rodgers. Played 4 snaps in the opener against the Bills, and it's the same story really as it was ahead of the draft last year. That they need offensive line and weapons to sort of give Rodgers everything they can, because they're really trying to make a go at this, and this is probably the last year, isn't it?
Yeah, well, maybe. He said he wants to play 3 or 4 more years, doesn't he? But
yeah, whether that actually happens or not is a different, especially coming back off the injury as well.
Yeah, I think if he plays well this year, he will definitely stay on. But yeah, they're very much in win now mode. I think they've actually had a very, very good off season. They are all in, so they are signing injury-prone older players, but that's what all-in teams tend to do. They're not signing them to 3-4 year deals either, so they are kind of remaining some sort of flexibility for if Aaron Rodgers does decide to leave. But in terms of draft, we're going to talk about it in both NFC and AFC episodes a million times. People will hear this, but the offensive line class being this good, Aaron Rodgers coming off an Achilles, older quarterback. I know the weapons could do some improvement, but he's thrown to worse weapons in other places. Obviously, I know Devontae Adams was there, but he's still probably going to have more, if you include running backs, stronger weapons here than he may have had at times in Green Bay.
Especially with Mike Williams coming over as well. Obviously, if he stays healthy, that's the thing with Mike Williams. But with him coming over as well, when you've got Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams as your two, that's a good receiver duo. It's just whether Mike Williams can stay healthy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And wide receiver's good as well in this class. We said it for offensive line a lot, but wide receiver's great. Like, there's people that would be wide receiver 6 or 7 in this class that would have been wide receiver 2 or 3 arguably last year, depending on where you rank them. So there's options like Xavier Legette, Jalen McMillan in round 2 or 3. They trade up to round 2. Obviously, that round 2 pick's gone to Green Bay in the Rodgers deal. But yeah, for me, I still go offensive line at 10 if they stick at 10. However, if I am them, I do try and kind of marry future and current, and I would try and trade back. I think if you could trade back from 10 into the mid-first, get a second-round pick, and then you can just go offensive line, wide receiver, offensive line again in round 3. I think you can fit all your needs in. But yeah, there'll be a lot of people mocking Brock Bowers here at 10, because that would be very fun if he goes at 10. But the sensible thing for me is offensive line. We'll just see how sensible the GM and Robert Saleh is, because we mentioned Greer before, but
they're also on the hot seat.
They're also on the they're on the hot seat, and if Rodgers decides to stay, they're arguably even more on the hot seat, because he'll have more control in saying, right, I want this ex-coach in, or I want this GM in that I know from this part of the NFL. So yeah, there's loads of players. We haven't gone that far in the draft yet. So Talise Fuaga, got Troy Fatanu as well. Fashanu, another one. The names are very similar in this year's draft. Or Joe Alt, if he falls to 10, that would be an even better pick. So yeah, we'll see what they do, but I would trade back. But you never know. When they get to 10, there's like a sparkly tackle there, or Brock Bowers. They might just pull the trigger. But be interesting. I think they're arguably the best roster in this division, but I don't think it's arguable to us. They probably are the best roster.
Yeah, it's just, we're in 7 games with the team they had last year, with the quarterback play they had last year. It was pretty impressive. Again, it's just been, can Rodgers come in, stay healthy? You mentioned the free agent class they've had as well. They've had a great free agency, obviously losing Bryce Huff to the Eagles, but basically swapping him for Hassan Reddick, who's come over for basically a 1-year deal with some voyage years as well. But that's some good pass rush that you've basically gone like for like, if probably not better with Hassan Reddick for a year. Again, offensive line: Tyron Smith, John Simpson, Morgan Moses, all coming in from Dallas and Baltimore. That's what they targeted before the season. And then you've got a couple players coming from San Francisco, and then you've got Mike Williams coming over from the Chargers as well. They've been quite smart, a lot of 1-year deals, which is what they need really with the way that this roster is shaped. And they've had a pretty good free agency. It's just whether they can sort of hit the ground running, because if they don't hit the ground running, then there's a little bit of there's probably someone. Maybe the whole regime's going to get fired. So it's an important year for the Jets. And then there's the Patriots, who went 4-13 in the regular season. They had the 3rd overall pick, and this is the most interesting team for me in the draft, because I don't know what they're going to do. Because at number 3, obviously they need a quarterback. There's no hiding they need a quarterback, because Matt Jones' project is over. He's been traded to Jacksonville as a backup. Bailey Zappi's still there, but they've said that it'd be interesting to see, obviously, it'd be interesting to see what happens at quarterback for the Patriots, because they're gonna get they're at 3, right? So they're gonna probably get the third best guy. Hypothetically in the draft, are they going to trade down to a QB needed team? Which I think they should do, because that roster is terrible. They're going to be up here again. They're going to be picking up here again next year, I think. And if you're not sold on a guy at 3, then I think you trade down, because someone will be sold at desperate to come get up and give you picks that you can use next year when you really try and rebuild. And obviously this team is very, very low on weapons as well. But the quarterback is the question. Now, who if you were to rank your quarterbacks, who do you think will go sort of fall to 3, and who do you think should be at 3? If it is
Yeah, this is the difficult part for me. But you're right; they are the most interesting team. Then we'll talk about the other team in a minute. For me, the Chargers very interesting as well, 5. But yeah, they are this is the most interesting pick in the draft. To answer your question, Drake. So Caleb Williams is the best player in the draft for me. Drake May is closer to Caleb Williams for me than people want to admit. And then I've got Jane Daniels as my third option, with JJ being a bit of a distant 4th compared to those guys. And then I've got Spencer Rattler at 5, which no one else will have. So to answer the question about what will they or could they do, I think if Drake May is there at 3, they should take Drake May. I think he's that good. I think he also fits very traditional. They are a traditional team. I know they've changed how they are scouting, but if you look at who's taken over now in Ron Wolf's son, Elliot Wolf, they love big, tall, strong players. That's the way they play, or the way his father, I guess, is scouted. I guess. So that fits Drake May. Now, if Washington take Drake May at 2, and Jane Daniels is the pick, doesn't feel like a New England player to me. So I would trade out then, and it's probably worth us mentioning the teams that may trade up. Most of them could be AFC. Obviously, you've got the Vikings in the NFC, 2 first-round picks now. They are everyone's favourite, but desperation does crazy things, and I think the Raiders and the Broncos in that division are both very, very desperate. So that'll be the teams I would trade with. So I would take May if he's there. If May's not there, I would be tempted to trade back. But if you're a fan of the Patriots, you probably just want them to take a young quarterback. I think the only way I'll be saying, if we do a post-draft pod and we do grades or whatever, the only way I'll be saying it's bad is if they take JJ McCarthy over both. If they take JJ McCarthy at 3, you just trade that pick and you get loads of assets. It's probably worth just finally mentioning that next year's draft class is not good at the moment.
No,
someone could come out of nowhere. Like Jane Daniels wasn't predicted to be this high before.
Yeah, came out of nowhere, won a Heisman.
Yeah, but the other 3 guys, including JJ, were picked to be in the first round all summer long last year. So next year's class isn't great. So if you're New England, if you do trade back, I would still take a quarterback in, either trade back into round 1, pick 32 with the Chiefs, 31 with the Niners, or at 34 I would take whoever their next player is on the board, whether that's Penix, whether that's Bo Nix, whether that's Rattler. I would do that, because I just think next year's so bad. There's an argument that Penix would go in round 1 next year if it was.
Because they're expected to be bad anyway, there's no harm in sitting a QB behind Jacoby Brissett either for a year. If you don't feel that they're ready to play, but you're taking a punt with them in the second round, then you can give them a year to learn behind Jacoby Brissett, and he's been in that role before as well. But Brissett has, so yeah, it's a good sort of thing for them to do, and yet look for them to go for a receiver at some point as well, because when KJ Osborne's probably a receiver too, that's probably quite a bit of a problem. If I'm being honest,
offensive tackle's not great either there.
No, so you lost Trent Brown to the Bengals. Yeah, so the offensive line's not great either. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. Right, we'll move over to the AFC South, and we'll start with the Colts. They went 9-8, just missed out in the playoffs last year. They've got 3 top 100 picks, 15, 46, and 82. And it's an interesting thing. The Colts haven't really been active in free agency at all. Really, they obviously Gardner Minshew went to the Raiders. Anthony Richardson hopefully healthy back now. He impressed me in his limited games at the start of last year. Zach Moss went to Cincinnati, and Isaiah McKenzie went to the Giants as well. And then they brought in Joe Flacco to back up Richardson, and then the other really big free agency addition is Raekwon Davis on the defensive line coming over from the Dolphins. They paid Michael Pittman, they gave him a big contract as well. So, but I've got receiver as another need because it'd be interesting if there's a receiver there at 15, you could pair him with Pittman. That makes sense. Defensive line as well for me is an interesting one because DeForest Buckner's a free agent at the end of the season. So if there's someone there like Byron Murphy or Johnny Newton or someone like that, then maybe that's an opportunity there. The Colts are interesting, so I think they're probably a team that could trade back. They don't have many needs, but I'm fascinated to see what they do because they don't really have that many needs.
Yeah, they don't have many needs, but they also don't have many.
No, they're just got players. Depth. I'd say they're just like they're okay. Yeah,
they're missing stars, aren't they? As a team. Similar to you, wide receiver makes sense. Someone to pair with Pittman. Now this will be a very popular Brock Bowers spot. Obviously, the Colts have drafted a lot of tight ends. Not in the first round, but second and third. And they keep going for it, and it keeps not quite working out. So maybe they go back to the well. But you're right. In free agency, they just done what kind of Ballard always does, which is keep his own guys. So keep everyone. They were very linked to L'Jarius Sneed. So I know we've mentioned defensive tackle and wide receiver or tight end like Bowers. I think Bowers would be a great pick. If they pick Bowers, it makes a lot of sense. And as like the way I would build a team, if I've got a rookie quarterback that I know they like him, but they're not like they're not sure he's CJ Stroud. They're not sure he's that good. Yeah. I would pick a weapon to try and help his development. But the other position, like I said, they wanted Sneed is they do need a defensive back, whether that's they need a corner for me. So you've got Terran Arnold or Quinion Mitchell in this sort of range. Maybe Cooper DeJean as well. Who could play safety.
You could take the first corner off the board at 15. With the way that it's so offensive heavy at the start of the draft that you could get the best corner on in the draft.
Yeah, I think it'll be. Raiders maybe 13 or 14. If they don't take the first corner, it could be the Colts. But if Bowers on the board, I think it makes sense. But a corner makes a lot of sense. You don't have to go receiver here at 15 because I think the top three are going to be off the board. If you love Brian Thomas Jr., then go for it. But I think Bowers is probably going to be more their type of player. But with pick 46, you'll be in range to get another receiver. So if you want about round one, receiver round two, or Brock Bowers round one, and then corner, probably you're looking 46 might be a bit of a reach. But there's players like, just want to throw some names out. They've got Max Melton from Rutgers, who's had a meeting with the Colts. He is a very Colts player. He's like L'Jarius Sneed, like athlete, crazy, press, aggressive. And he'd be more of a round 3 player. So there's some options there. But I expect them to go receiver in one of the first 3 rounds for sure.
As for the Jaguars, well, they addressed the receiver position. They lost Calvin Ridley, but brought in Gabe Davis from the Bills, as we mentioned earlier. They also short their defensive line, bringing in Arik Armstead from the Niners. A couple additions at defensive back, but there's still a need for offensive line for the Jaguars. Again, feel like we're saying it for every team, but Trevor Lawrence didn't look great last year. The offensive line wasn't. It was worse for the Jags, obviously losing Jawan Taylor as well as other starters on that offensive line. Cam Robertson being suspended at the start of the season as well didn't help them either. So I think for me, that they should offensive line to just you're going to get a good offensive lineman. You'd like to think at 17. I think it's a trade down spot to a QB. If there's a QB needed team that if someone really likes if McCarthy falls, which I don't think will, but if Penix is there, so if someone likes him, you could probably trade down and then pass rush because Josh Allen's gonna be a free agent. They franchise tagged him, but they've not paid Josh Allen or anything, so maybe a pass rusher as well. Someone like Leatu or maybe Versa might be there as well.
Yeah, Versa will probably be there. Latu might be there. Weird team. This is obviously not just draft; it is off season as well. They've just had a weird off season. I like the Mitch Moore signing from the Bills. Hate the Gabe Davis signing from the Bills. Ridley, could you have just done it earlier for a cheaper deal and given up the 2 instead of the 3 rather than letting him walk? They're a little bit all over the place as a franchise. But I agree with the offensive line. Obviously, we've spoken about it a lot, so I don't want to bang on about just that position. But they also need a corner. And again, the big 3, there's 3 corners that are going to go. Now, watch Wiggins will go top 3 now and ruin this clip. But the big 3 are Terran Arnold, Quinion Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean. Like any of those 3, they take them at 17. Everyone would be like, great pick. They should do it. One thing I don't think they should do is add to the weirdness of the offseason and trade up to like pick 10 and take someone. Like, just don't waste your assets. They've got they're a good team, but they've got more holes than people think. Like they said, defensive tackle, defensive end, corner, another corner, wide receiver one, arguably, and then offensive tackle, because I think Cam Robinson's also a free agent next year.
They got some free agent. Like if you just read through these free agencies, free agents from next year, you've got Josh Allen, Tyson Campbell, who's their best corner, Cam Robinson, Brandon Scherf, Walker Little. That's 3 offensive linemen, and then you've got starting safety Andre Cisco, and then you've got Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, 50-year options to decide with as well. Christian Kirk, you could trade, you can move on from him as well. There's a lot of. Be interesting to see what the Jags look like next year.
Yeah, so don't trade up. But if a team like the Bills or the Chiefs or someone wants to trade up for Brian Thomas Jr. and you're at pick 17, I would take the extra picks if I was a team like the Jags and just kind of not rebuild, because they're still going to be good with Trevor Lawrence, but just add to those holes on the roster. So yeah, they're an interesting team in the middle of the draft, because they could be one of the teams like the Raiders where they take a random player and everyone who follows the draft is like, what are the Jags doing? So yeah, they're a fun team at pick 17 for sure.
I mean, they're chance at the 1 seed midway through last season, and then they just completely crumbled. The way it was, they had a couple losses. They had a chance to certainly, the way their season just went like that was a real concern at the end of the last season, it sort of carried on their weirdness going into this season as well. So I'm fascinated to see what the Jaguars look like next year. As for the Texans, well, they no longer have a first-round pick. They traded their first-round pick to the Cardinals last year in the trade to go and get Will Anderson. And then they had Cleveland's first-round pick because of the Deshaun Watson trade, but they traded that to the Vikings, got an extra second-round pick, and then they obviously made the move for Stephon Diggs as well. Now, this Texans roster, I love it. I think it's you've lost a few players on defense, but you've made some additions on defense as well. Obviously, Grenard losing him to the Vikings, but then another swap, basically getting Danielle Hunter back as well. There's not really that big of a hole. I guess defensive line maybe, or maybe is the way you could look there in the second round. And as you said, there's probably gonna be someone in the second round at defensive line. But their off season was bringing in Joe Mixon and then trading for Stephon Diggs a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so I love CJ Stroud last year. So Texans, since they got rid of Watson, and they're all the kind of the NFL's like darling team at the moment. We shouldn't forget that they did do some dodgy things themselves with the Watson issues. But if you take that out, I think since then they've done a very good job. Obviously, new GM, new head coach, they've done great. They've done some big trades, and they've got 5 picks still in the top 75. So they've got pick 42, 59, in the top 100, 86, 65, 73. So they've still got ways they can improve the roster, which is defensive tackle for me, for sure. That's a weak position for them. Offensive tackle, because the right tackle is very old. They need a right tackle. And interior offensive line, their guard, whichever side Mason doesn't play, the other side's also very old. So there's some key positions there, but in terms of where you are in the draft, that's where you want to get a guard. Pick 42, 59, 65, 73. You can get a good guard there. You'll probably get like the second tier of defensive tackle as well at 42 and 59. Like we said earlier, Chris Jenkins from Michigan. That's a really good player that fits their scheme. They can fill their holes for sure. And if I was them, I would probably also draft a wide receiver at some point. The Diggs move looked good on paper, and then it came out
a 1-year deal. Yeah,
1-year deal. So for me, I actually hate that trade. The only way that trade is if you win the Super Bowl this year, which they might do. But if they don't,
they could do. Yeah, with this roster, they could do. Nico Collins is a free agent next year as well. So again, if you get a receiver, then you're drafting ahead of need because their roster's so good now. You can do that. Yeah,
and I still think I would pay him, but again, they might make a decision not to pay him. So if someone falls to 42 and you're like, you know what, we don't need a receiver right now, but let's just go for it at 42, and either we let Collins or Diggs leave next summer. Overall they've just had a good one. Their defense is good, but we'll see how they improve. But yeah, they're probably favoured, I say, to open the season against Kansas City. I think that's a fun pick.
Be a really fun game.
Yeah, and I think apart from the Bengals, they're probably most people's pick to play the Chiefs in the AFC title game. So should be fun. And I love CJ Stroud, so should be an exciting year for the Texans. But they need a good draft. You don't want to waste those 5 top 100 picks for sure.
And then we'll finish off with the Titans. Now it's a new era in Tennessee. Obviously, Mike Vrabel's gone. You got Callahan coming in as the head coach, and they just obviously no Derrick Henry. This is a very new Tennessee team. A lot of the picks they made as well, they've moved on from in previous years as well.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what the Tennessee Titans do. Now, if you look at every mock draft, you see Titans number 7, Joe Alt. That's basically like the most common pick you see in a mock draft, and it makes sense as well. You drafted the offensive lineman last year, forgotten his name, in the first round last year, and then so you just shoring up the offensive line again. I think is a bit that makes the most sense. And obviously you're a Chiefs fan, so the trade for L'Jarius Sneed, it was the big move, as well as signing Calvin Ridley from their division rivals Jacksonville as well.
Yeah, Peter Skronsky's the name you were
That's the one.
trying to think of. Really good offensive lineman. Weird offseason. They've spent a lot of money, obviously.
I like it though, because that Tennessee team for me was very boring under Vrabel. I was getting fed up with it the last couple of years, especially the way they played the last 2 years. At the start it was great, but the last 2 years they've not been last 2 years they've not been great at all really to watch, and it's been very low scoring, and the defense got worse last 2 years as well. So it's new team, but I like what they've done.
Yeah, you're more of a fan of it than me. I think spending loads of money to maybe be the worst team in your division still is could be a weird move.
If Will Levis pans out, then it's that's what they're hoping for, really, isn't it? And now Tannehill's out of the building, it's Will Levis' time. That's what they're hoping for.
I just don't think he's very good. So that'd be my concern. Now, the Snead trade is okay for them. It's just the contract is like, are you going to be good in the 3 years that he plays for you, or are you going to be bad? Because then it's not a good move. But they definitely, obviously, like Levis. They like him more than I think people realize. This shows they like him. You would not spend this money if you didn't like your quarterback. So I think that's a good sign if you're a Titans fan, for sure. And I basically I like one move they did, and then I hate the next. That's just that they've been a little bit too aggressive. They've been a bit New Englandy those 3 years ago, where they spent loads of money on players. None
of those players panned out either. That New England class.
Yeah, half the moves are okay. Like Snead, I could fine. Ridley, you've overpaid, but I understand why. But it's like Chidobe Awuzie and Pollard, just 2 moves. You don't need to spend those money on those 2 players. But yeah, they're obviously going for it. So I don't think they're going to trade back from 7 because they are going for it. I'll be very surprised if they do trade back from 7. And I think you're right. In every mock draft you read, people like me that do the mock draft competitions, everyone's putting Joe Alt at 7. We'll talk about the Chargers in a bit, but if they stay at 5 and they take Joe Alt, I still think Titans probably take another tackle, like Fashanu or Fuaga or Fatanu. They'll take a tackle for me. I don't think they'll trade back. And then pick 38, I think you probably go somewhere on the defensive or offensive line again. It would not surprise me if you go tackle at 7, guard at 38, and you just go double up, because Will Levis is not great under pressure. So why add the extra hassle to his life in the NFL? Just go offensive line. And obviously
the Titans' offensive line was okay last year. It was better than it was the year before, where it was terrible, but it still isn't like a top unit. So
it's like one of the worst 5 in the league still.
Yeah. But it was better than it was the year before, so they improved. But yeah, just adding another player makes sense in that aspect as well. And they might trade down as well, but
maybe you think if JJ's still on the board, they might get an offer, or maybe if someone wants to trade above the Bears for Dunze, I guess. But I wouldn't trade back too far. I wouldn't want to miss out on one of the top tackles if you're the Titans. So yeah, we'll see. They're a fun team. They're one of the more entertaining AFC teams. Like I said, the top of the draft is very NFC heavy, so the Titans are very entertaining for the draft. So we'll see what they do.
And with them as well, I'm really interested just to see what their offense looks like as well. Because I mean, I'm a Dolphins fan. I saw Will Levis. He one of his best games of last year was that Monday Night Football game. Yeah, well, again, he was making some throws. Admittedly, the Dolphins chose not to cover crossing routes, but he impressed me in that one game. And again, his arm is what everyone sort of raves about. So I'm interested to see with Callahan in there as well. Obviously, offensive head coach. I guess maybe he had a plan for him when he interviewed for the job as well. I'm interested to see what that plan was. Certainly. Okay, we'll finish off with the AFC West, and we'll start with the Denver Broncos. Again, fascinating team for me. Obviously, losing Russell Wilson, releasing him before free agency even started, and obviously benching him at the end of last year as well. That we knew that was going to happen. They're at 12 though, so they're not really in prime quarterback spot. Now, was it year 2 of Sean Payton? I'm really interested to see what they look like, because some of their moves in free agency for me don't make sense. Like paying Brandon Jones the money they did at safety doesn't make any sense because he's not very good. He's a blitzing safety. He can't cover. They've obviously moving on from Justin Simmons, losing Jerry Jeudy to the Browns as well. This team it sucks. I think it's very much like the rebuild team, but it was what they do at quarterback, isn't it? That's because right now their quarterback's Jarrett Stidham. I think is their number one QB, right? So
potentially, Ben DiNucci as a backup.
Yeah.
Which was fun. DiNucci time. They've definitely got a chance to be the worst team in the NFL.
Them and the Patriots, I think for me, the by far are two teams that are trending like downwards.
Definitely. Especially we're doing AFC today, so you've got those two, and the Raiders are probably your prime candidates for the worst AFC teams. I just don't know what they do here. Do they trade up? Like in my opinion, if they do go if they get to Drake May at 3, and Patriots do want to trade back, then I think he is a very good player, and I just don't think next year they'll get a player of that level. However, Peyton is a win now guy, and you've got players like Dak Prescott that's now in this slightly strange position. You've got Kyler Murray that obviously he's the guy for this year, but that he's tradable next year in theory. Trevor Lawrence hasn't got paid yet. Could you prize him from Jacksonville? I would doubt it, but whether he wants to go that route and you have more picks to trade next summer and you just kind of improve the roster this year, next year you go all in for a QB. It all depends how Sean Payton views it, but he's not a very patient man, so it would not surprise me if they go quarterback. Now, if they do go Nix or Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. at 12, then everyone's going to be slating them. That would be a very, very bad pick. Now,
especially when you look at, I was going to say as well, especially when you look at some of the players they could lose this offseason as well. I mean, I know they're going to have some cap room, but the free agents, you've got Garrett Bowles, DJ Jones, Javonte Williams, they could probably going to move on from him. Cortland Sutton, they could trade. They won't have any dead cap there. I mean, Pat Surtain, they've got to pay. But if an offer comes in for him, like, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But
he is a coach that will want to win now, though. So
that's the thing. With Sean Payton there, it just complicates the situation so much because it's a weird team for what Sean Payton wants.
It is a weird team. So we'll see what they do. A clever way to go about it is to trade back and then maybe still go QB in round 1 or round 2. But it will not surprise me. Just some names. J.C. Latham, tackle out of Alabama, very good player. They need a right tackle for me, but he can play guard as well. Brock Bowers, we mentioned him earlier, very prime candidate at pick 12. I think Sean Payton would love to have Bowers, and they haven't got loads of weapons. And then, trade back and go QB. If the Bills do want to do this crazy trade up for Brian Thomas Jr. to get in that top 12, then, okay, cool, let's just take whoever their next quarterback on the board is at 28 and live that way. I don't think they're as entertaining as the Titans and Chargers because I think they're just going to be terrible. But I think they could go a number of ways. I think they could trade up for a massive trade up for a QB, trade back, go QB, trade back and pick up loads of assets would be the clever thing. Or they could stick at 12 and just go a really, really, really good player, which they definitely need. But they've only got 2 picks in the top 100, so they need to do something. So I think that there'll be a prime trade up or back candidate. We'll just see if Sean Payton gets his way because he is a very aggressive head coach for sure.
The Chargers' new Jim Harbaugh era has had an interesting start. Their offense is going to look completely different next year to what it did in 2023. Moving on from Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett, Joshua Kelly, Jalen Guyton, all leaving this offseason. Bringing in Gus Edwards pretty much and Hayden Hurst and Will Dissler, very much running back tight end. That's what it sounds like they're going to run the ball a lot, and maybe the Gus Bus has got a chance to be a running back 1. But this is the Chargers now at 5, obviously because of all the injuries last year, Herbert getting injured and everything. At that point, it is an interesting scenario because you look at the whole receiver. You've lost 3-4 receivers this free agency. That's the whole. Obviously, you're probably going to get your pick at the receivers. You could say maybe if Arizona might get, but you're going to get one of Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors. You're going to get one of those three guys certainly there for you at 5, unless something drastic happens. So they're going to get to choose one of them. And yeah, it's the question: what do they do? Do they get the best receiver on the board, or maybe second best receiver? Do they go offensive line? They've had a better offensive line play the last couple of years, but just to protect Justin Herbert, or do they trade down to a QB needing team, grab someone on defense because they've got a lot of players on defense as well, haven't they?
Yeah, most fascinating team probably of the AFC teams outside the Patriots. In terms of what I think they should do, the dream is there be a quarterback on the board at 5. The Giants definitely have some rumors that they like quarterback. And then, I think you want the Vikings, ideally, because you get 2 picks this year. The only one that might be better is, ironically, probably the Broncos, because there's a chance their next year pick could be crazy high. But how often do teams trade for QBs in division? It's not very common. The Raiders, again, are also in division. So I think if you're a Chargers fan, for me, the ideal thing would be we trade back, go to 11, and then in terms of what they could do at 5 or 11, Jim Harbaugh loves offensive line. He obviously had that press conference the other day where he said, "Tell me about the offensive line. That's where it all starts on a football team. That's the first place I look." That was his exact words. So for me, I don't think it matters what wide receivers on the board at 5. Their first goal will be trade back to 11, I think, and take a tackle. Or maybe if Jim's feeling aggressive, it's stay at 5 and take a tackle. That's why earlier I mentioned for the Titans, Joe Alt could be off the board here, and I think that could be at pick 5. So yeah, I would trade back and just go offensive tackle at 11. Then you can pick a wide receiver at 22 or 23 whenever the first round pick is. But yeah, we'll see what they do. The only way they can't trade back is if I think QBs go 1, 2, 3, 4. If the Cardinals take a trade at 4.
Yeah, maybe Minnesota trade up with the Cardinals. Yeah.
Yeah, then I think at pick 5, you might get a trade offer for Marvin Harrison Jr., but it's not going to be a QB level big jump. It'll be I don't even know who it would be, whether it would be the Giants, whether it would be the Falcons at 8, the Bears at 9, the Jets at 10, maybe. I just don't see there being many other offers for pick 5. So yeah, their ideal scenario is there's a QB left of the board and they get a big offer. But yeah, we'll see. Go back to what you said earlier, they are going to run the ball a hell of a lot.
So even if QBs go 1, 2, 3, 4, even if they had their pick of the receivers, you still don't think they'll go receiver?
No, I don't know. Not Jim Harbaugh. He loves to run the ball. JJ McCarthy didn't throw the ball in college at all for a reason. The only receiver he would go is Marvin Harrison Jr. He's not going to pick Malik Neighbors. That's not his traditional style. He wants someone that's going to be able to run block as well, win contested catches. I think they're quite closely graded for me, but I think he would prefer Marvin Harrison Jr. But I think if he's got Big Joe Alt sat there and his idea of going Rashawn Slater can play left or right, Alt can play the other side, and then we'll get receivers later. I think Harbaugh would love that. So that'd be my guess. But you never know. My friends that are Chargers fans want them to go trade back or Harrison Jr. That seems to be what the fans want. But a lot relies on that pick at 4, doesn't it, with the Cardinals, I think. Yeah,
certainly. Right, moving over from the Chargers to the Chiefs, your Chiefs, of course. The 32nd pick, closing out the first round because obviously the Super Bowl champions. Again, the big hole in this roster compared to last year is L'Jarius Sneed, moving to the Titans. Lost a couple more players on defense, Willie Gay, Mike Edwards as well. There's a couple players lost on defense. And the big addition, really, you could say, were Hollywood Brown, Smith as well, but then he wasn't really that much for the fact that the last 2 places he'd been. So, what do you think the Chiefs is it receiver still to target back in the first round? Maybe even trade out, get some extra picks. What's your what's the view on the Chiefs?
Yeah, it's hard to know without who's on the board, but trade back's always a good option for me. But the Chiefs GM does not trade back; he normally trades up. So I imagine the Chiefs maybe try and trade up for Brian Thomas Jr. They probably try and trade up for
that'd be cool.
Yeah, AD Mitchell probably. But this is an Andy Reid team, and Andy Reid likes the offensive line. The Chiefs need a left tackle. They tried to trade up for a left tackle 2 years ago. They tried to trade up last year. They also tried to trade up for an edge player last year because Andy Reid believes in the trenches. So I think if their favourite offensive linemen are off the board, then they're just going to go wide receiver for sure. I don't think they'll go corner like people think. I think they like their corner room. That's why they traded Snead for as little as they did.
Well, I mean, the DB room there last year was so good. I mean, you've lost a couple of guys, this free agency certainly, but like you're good at finding guys later on in the draft as well, and that's the thing as well. I trust the Chiefs with late round picks, more than most teams. So
yeah, especially that position. Yeah, whereas wide receiver they're not good at later positions. So yeah, I think it'll be tackle or receiver. Jordan Morgan's a name that gets mentioned. Tyler Guyton, Amarius Mims, they're the sort of tackles that maybe are there or with a small trade up. Kinsley Sumatia as well from BYU, which is where Andy Reid went to school. That's a very that they've got a meeting with him before the draft. That'd be another name to mention. So yeah, it'll be offensive line for me or receiver. But regardless of what position it is, it would not surprise me if they do a small trade up and whether they use the Snead pick or their own third from next year, and then they trade up. It wouldn't be a big top 15 trade. It'll be a more similar to the McDuffie trade where it's 20, 21, 22, 23, that sort of range. But yeah, there's more holes here than I don't think it's been a very good free agency for the Chiefs, but I said that every year. So there's more holes here. So they need a good draft again, but they haven't got as many picks as they have in previous years. So I think if they trade up, it'll just be a small one.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do. The Chiefs and the Niners, I have no idea what they're going to do back of the first round. So I'm really interested for that on draft night. And we'll finish off the AFC with the Las Vegas Raiders. Now they made the sort of headlines on the first day of free agency by paying Christian Wilkins that massive contract. Obviously, shoring up the defensive line, having him, and Max Crosby as well. That's certainly a good pass rush and defensive line. Which is going to be scary to some of the teams that they play. But at pick 13, they're again a big hole at quarterback. They've brought in Gardner Minshew. Now, I think that's a good guy to start if you're sort of tanking or looking to move for the future. But there are players on this Raiders roster that were sort of sold a win now. Mentality a couple of years ago, like Devontae Adams, for example. They've moved on from Josh Jacobs as well. Brought in Alex Mattison at running back, but the Raiders. I mean, you'd like to think they'd trade up a QB, but they've got quite a few holes. So I don't know what they do, if I'm being honest, because they're competing with the Broncos, really, aren't they? If they are going for a quarterback.
Yeah, well, their issue is that the Vikings have got more assets than both those two teams.
Yes.
And the Chargers, like we said earlier, is one of the... But I would be very shocked if 3 quarterbacks aren't off the board by the Giants pick at 6. So I don't think you're going to get a trade. Maybe the Giants at 6 are the only other team you'll get a trade up with. And the Vikings have just got more assets because teams just care about first-round picks this year more than next, especially like I said earlier, that the quarterback class is weaker last year, but in general, this draft class is going to be one of the best for the last 5 or 6 years on paper. So teams want 2 picks this year. So for me, I just think the Raiders are going to struggle to outbid the Vikings. Now, they'll have more of a chance than the Broncos will because they've got more picks than the Broncos in the next couple of years. So
they've got a second and the Broncos haven't. So
so whether they go all their first, so they're allowed to trade in the future and the second, but you have to really love a quarterback at 3 to do that. But yeah, that is what they need. You're right. Devontae Adams and the guys on defense have been, and Miller as well, left tackle. They'll be desperate.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Well, that's the thing as well. They with the Raiders, Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, Cotton Miller, Jacoby Myers as well, who they gave that massive contract to a couple of years ago. They have potential outs for all 4 of those players after this season as well. So it'd be interesting to see what they do with those guys, whether they just blow it up next year or because again, it's whether. Yeah, they've got outs really. That most of their deals are up after this year, so it's just money wise. So yeah, it's really interesting. New obviously Antonio Pierce got the job full time, new GM as well. It's really interesting to see what they'll do.
Yeah, I just think they're going to be bad. I think Antonio.
Yeah, that's the thing. But with the stars they have, they shouldn't be bad. But it's because the rest of the roster is so bad.
Yeah, I don't know how good of a coach he is either, but the off season is very weird for some of the stuff that he's been saying. But as a team, they need a quarterback. So I kind of go with the same line I do with other teams we've spoken about. I would take a quarterback in round 1, 2, or 3 because why not just take the risk of doing that? maybe trade up, but you're still going to have Herbert and Mahomes. Like, your trade up's going to have to be really good. That's why I don't really like the Wilkins signing, because I just don't see the 3 years he's with you. Are you going to ever be the top 2 in your own division? Like,
No,
maybe
probably not.
second if Jim doesn't work out, or maybe Mahomes gets injured one year, something like that. But yeah, they're very interested in terms of other needs, because you could talk about quarterback all day for them. But yeah, they need cornerbacks. So we said earlier about the first cornerback off the board. If they don't trade up or trade back at 13, I would be surprised if it wasn't corner. The only reason it wouldn't, I think, is if they go offensive line, because they do need guard and maybe a right tackle. So yeah, corner probably, but yeah, offensive guard or tackle like Fuaga would be a good pick for them. But yeah, they desperately need a quarterback. So yeah, they're a fun team to watch. If they don't pick any quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds, I think their fans will be quite disappointed, just because how do you sell that to Devontae Adams? I just think you may as well trade him.
Although
Jets.
I don't know if there's a more Vegas quarterback than Gardner Minshew. That's what I'm saying.
I don't want to keep talking about him because I love him so much. But Spencer Rattler went to high school in Vegas and broke every single record in Vegas. Very well known for kind of being the star of that city. Unfortunately, he probably was too much of a star, and that kind of went to his head, which is why he's had some of the issues he's had. But yeah, their fans that are from Vegas rather than Oakland would love it if they ended up picking Rattler. But I feel like Michael Penix as well is probably a pick that makes sense because he can throw the ball all over the place. But yeah, we'll see. I feel like their owner wants to be aggressive, so it might be a battle between Sean Payton and the Raiders owner to see who can find some sort of trade up for a quarterback. But yeah, the Raiders are definitely an interesting team, like you said.
Awesome. Oh, that's it. We've recapped the entirety of the AFC ahead of the draft. We'll be back for the NFC within the next couple of days. Certainly within the next week or so, we'll be back for the NFC as well. We're doing all the same, and with the NFC as well. There's plenty of teams with multiple first round picks. There's also teams that top of the 2 of the draft. There's quarterbacks to talk about as well, and we'll talk about the receiver class as well, certainly in the next podcast as well. But yeah, it's been nice to be back for the pod. We're gonna have at least 3 or 4 more podcasts, I'd say, certainly in and around the draft, and then we'll have a little bit of break before previewing the season as well. But it'd be nice to have you back, Liam, and tell everyone about your draft stuff, because you've been very active recently, haven't you?
Yeah, so Go for 2 Pod on Twitter /X and all podcast platforms. We are part of the Full 10 Yards network as well, so we kind of do all work together. We've got some draft analysts on that get paid to talk about the draft and do draft guides and scout teams all year, go to games as well, and American scouts. So we've kind of had a flavor of the first round, second round type of players today. If you want more of a deeper dive, go over to our pod, because we've got a defensive episode, we've got 2 offensive episodes, and you can go learn some stuff from there. And we'll be doing some mock drafts as well, which is fun, because you can kind of hear the typical scenarios that people are thinking about, how the draft could change depending on who gets picked where. So go over and listen to that. But yeah, thanks, Sam, for having me on. I've loved it, and look forward to coming back talking more draft in the future.
Absolutely. I've been Sam, he's been Liam. This has been a Full 10 Yards NFL podcast, and we will see you when we go. We'll recap the entirety of the NFC and look forward to the draft.